Friends, welcome to the last week of object-oriented programming course. This week we will be concluding overall course that we started almost a decade back. That was the start of Jan, I believe, when we started this. Then we faced COVID. We had a lot of resistance on online classes, but eventually we are now in the last week of this course. In this week we will be discussing Java database connectivity, another very important topic of Java. In this topic we will discuss different aspects of database connectivity. Remember, this JDBC is used to access data in relational database. Relational database are those databases which are actually having multiple tables, and then in tables we actually manage our data in rows and columns. I'm not sure if you people have already covered a database course, but even if you have not covered, then that is not a prerequisite for understanding this chapter. I'll be giving you basics of how to store data in database. By the way, you need to understand that when you are processing, when you are performing any computation in a program, and as soon as your program ends, all the data is removed because your program is executing in primary memory. But if you want to save your data, if you want to refer back to the outputs of your data, then maybe in future, then you should save it inside the database. There are many databases. MS Access is one, MySQL is another one, Oracle, SQL GRE. There are multiple options. But what Java has done, Java has provided you a general purpose API. They call it JDBC, and JDBC is actually a kind of high level API that actually hides the detail underlying to the database. So on front end you will have Java application which will be using JDBC API, Java Database Connectivity API, and you need appropriate driver, and by using those drivers you can connect to any type of database. So remember, if you have got a front end, you don't need to do any change in the API. You just need to change the driver in order to be connected with the different databases. Remember, for Oracle they will have one set of driver, and for SQL GRE they will have another set of driver. For MS Access there will be another set of driver, but the connection between Java application and database would be established by JDBC driver, and for each of the database drivers are openly available. You can download them to make them part of your Java application. So the role of driver would be to translate all the queries which are coming from Java application to the database specific queries. For example, if Java application want to select some record, then it will be issuing some query. Those query will be translated by a driver into database specific format, and the database, if it is Oracle, it might be changed into one query, and it might be changed into another query if it is MySQL or SQL GRE or MS Access or whichever dataset you can talk about. Okay, so this JDBC will help you to save, update, delete, fetch data from database. There are, everything in Java is actually nothing but a set of classes, interfaces, and methods. So these are the interfaces that you need to cover. A driver interface for drivers, and you know what is the role of driver, which is actually to provide connectivity between application and the underlying database. So all these drivers will be loaded by using driver interface. Then in order to establish connection, you will be using connection interface, and in order to run a particular SQL statement on connection, you will be requiring a statement interface. And then we also have got a prepared statement which actually improves performance of a statement. We'll be looking at the difference between a statement and prepared statement. Then there is callable interface. Then there is result set, which will actually be the result of any query that you are going to issue to the data set. Then result set metadata, this will actually be data about data which is returned from the database. And then you can also get information about database by using database metadata. You'll be using it. And then row set will actually be representing one record inside the result set. These are a few classes which you need to cover: driver manager class, blob class, clob class, and then types class. When we will be using them, you'll get an idea. Now this ODBC API, before JDBC, we were actually using ODBC, which is Open Database Connectivity. Now there were certain disadvantages. I mean, before JDBC, ODBC was the only option for database connectivity using Java, and there were certain disadvantages. It was written in C, and you know, when it is written in C, it means it is not platform independent. So if you are on Windows platform, you will have one ODBC code, and if you want to migrate to Linux platform, you really cannot run same code on Linux because C code is pretty much platform dependent. So Java came up with this Java Database Connectivity API, and the sole reason why JDBC replaced ODBC, it was because JDBC was platform independent. What does it do? I mean, JDBC can connect to database, some very walk in the park type of classes and methods. You use them and you'll be able to connect to database. And then you on the connection, you will be executing queries. You will update statements to the database. You can retrieve results which are received from the database. And now let us first see JDBC driver. There are actually four types of JDBC driver. One is JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Then we've got native API driver. They are partly written in Java. I have already told you this was written in C. And then network protocol driver, they are fully Java driver. And thin driver, they are also fully Java driver. It means that 2, 3, and 4 are platform independent. This JDBC ODBC bridge driver, you can see here, you have got Java application. You will have JDBC ODBC bridge driver, and then this bridge driver will actually be translating SQL statements from Java to the database specific format for ODBC driver. And then you will also be needing an additional vendor database API which can really execute ODBC driver. Right, so a lot of complex architecture. So that is the reason why it was not very much liked. It had advantages. It was easy to use, can easily be connected to any database, but it had disadvantages. Performance was degraded because JDBC method call is converted into ODBC function call, and then the ODBC driver need to be installed on client machine. That was also one of the disadvantage. You can see this is a client machine where you needed all sort of these things in order to use JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Right, then came native API driver. It was partly written in Java. Again, you will have Java API, but then you will have Java a native API driver which will convert Java API call into vendor database library, which in turn talks to the underlying database. It had advantage of performance upgraded than JDBC ODBC bridge driver, but its disadvantages are the native driver need to be installed on each of the client machine. Again, a lot of setup was required on client machine. That is the reason why these native APIs were not originally very much preferred. Then you had the vendor client library needs to be installed on the client machine. So you can see a lot of additional stuff was required if you really want to work with native API driver. Then you had this network protocol driver where you actually broke your application into client and server side application. This server is actually working as a middleware, which talks to the database. Now client does not need to additionally install this vendor driver library. Rather, it was brought onto a separate machine. You call it a server machine, and that server machine was responsible to perform all the translation between a Java application and the database. But again, you needed to have a network protocol driver which can convert Java calls into middleware specific syntax. And then you have certainly some advantages. No client-side library is required because of the application server that can perform many tasks like auditing, load balancing, and logging, etc. But obviously network support is required on the client machine. It also requires database specific coding to be done in the middle tier. Maintenance of network protocol driver becomes an overhead because you needed to manage all these things. And then we also have this thin driver, which are nowadays mostly used. You will have a Java API, Java program. By using these thin driver, it can directly translate a Java statement into a database specific format. But nevertheless, you need some driver because driver has got a very important role. Driver will translate Java statement into SQL, into database specific format. When I say SQL, I mean structured query language. Structured query language is actually language of database. If you want to create a database, if you want to select some record from the database, if you want to update a record in the database, you need SQL. You need a structured query language. So they provide you some queries which you can use to play with the database. Right, they had advantage, better performance than all other driver. No software is required on the client side or the server side. But again, drivers depend on database. I don't think we can eliminate this requirement because if you eliminate this requirement, then you will have to make your API very heavy. I mean, your API will be database specific. So Java thought rather than adding too many classes, one for Oracle, one for MySQL, one for SQL GRE, one for Access, so rather than including all the support inside Java application, they thought why not to keep this database specific thing as a driver and then use driver as a bridge between Java application and database. So in order to decouple all the dependencies between Java application and database, they came up with this idea of having separate drivers. Right. Okay. I stop this video here. My youngest lady is creating some noise, so I have to manage it. I'm doing today babysitting for some reason, so I stop this video here, and when I come back I'll give an example, because without example obviously you won't be able to understand all these steps involved in creating a database and then accessing it with the Java program. Thank you very much.